Hi, how you going? This video is just about the new government report that's come out into Islamophobia. Now, one of the recommendations that I saw on a news article was that we start teaching children to be more respectful of the religion of Islam. Now, that could involve mosque visits, it could involve teaching Islam, all sorts of things. But I'm really not happy about this at all. I mean, I think that it is dangerous, that I want to share some things out of the Quran, I want to share some things out of Islam. And if you're a parent, I want you to write to the government and say you do not want your children to be taught anything about Islam because of these things. Now, Muhammad was, I'm not going to go into all the history of Muhammad, but he turned out to be quite a violent man, an aggressive man, and he had to make rules to protect some of the things that he was doing. Like as an example, he allowed his followers in war to take female captives and to have relations with those captives. And so verses were put into the Quran to try to prevent these women from getting out of control. And now one of those things was and this is regarding all Muslim wives, it wasn't just regarding slaves, it was regarding Muslim wives. The Quran actually says this, it says, "For those wives whom you fear rebellion, admonish them and banish them to their beds apart and scourge them." And now scourge means to beat or to hit. And now if you read the other hadiths, which is the additional writings that came along from people who knew Muhammad or had heard from him, this verse clearly is saying to beat your wife. That there's other passages which tell them to hit your wife, to beat your wife, whatever. So a part of Islam is wife beating, it's domestic violence. Now, if we went to the government and said, look, we don't want our children being taught domestic violence, so I'd be all over it. But because it's under this guise of a religion of Islam, it's accepted. But there's other things which are even more horrific than this in Islam. If you have a look at the life of this so-called prophet, Muhammad, he took a 6-year-old girl who was basically playing on a swing, playing with dolls, and married her at the age of 6 and had relations at the age of 9. Okay, now would you want your children in school to be taught about a man who took one of them when they were not even at school age to marry them and then have relations with them? I think it's just appalling. And it's worse than that. You know, all this violence we see in Islam in the world is because Muhammad used war as a tool to spread his religion. And so a lot of Muslim groups try to use war to spread Islam. But what they're spreading is this whole wicked thing of they used to stone women and do all sorts of things. Now, if you have a look at the Bible, in the Bible that there was a rule that was laid down initially in the Old Testament, which was if you commit adultery, you're to be stoned. But every time that God encountered an adulterer, he pardoned them. Jesus in the New Testament, when an adulterous woman was brought before him and they said, should we stone her? Jesus said, let him who's without sin cast the first stone, and he didn't stone the woman, he let her go. And now that was God in the flesh. So God himself is not violent and aggressive. He put the law there to try to prevent sin, whereas Muhammad went around stoning women willy-nilly. Any woman caught in adultery, stoned. Maybe some were let off, but the majority of them were stoned. We've got laws like if you're a thief, cut your hand off. Now, do we want these laws in Australia? Do we want these things taught to our children in school? They're not going to teach you so. They're going to say, oh, Muhammad said, look after the poor and the needy. And they'll teach all those little good things that he said, but they will neglect the fact that he said to beat your wives. He said you can have relations with a 6-year-old. It is just a wicked religion. Shouldn't even be such a word as Islamophobia. People should be fearful, they should be afraid, and they should be standing up against it. So contact your government and say, we do not want this stuff taught. And if they want to have a look for references, Quran 4:34, there's, I don't know how to pronounce, the Sahar al-Bukhari 5133, all these other hadiths which talk about the fact that Muhammad did this terrible thing to a 6-year-old. Now, this is under the guise of a religion. Now, nowhere in the Bible does it teach those things. Jesus said, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. But a part of love is standing up for the rights of these women that are going to be beaten, that are going to be forced into child marriage through this religion, and if it gets into our country, it will destroy it. Honestly, you've only got to look around the world where they are the majority, that there is always violence, aggression, and denigrating of the rights of women. My wife doesn't need to be beaten, neither little kids.